All right, so hopefully this is recording now. This video is just to supplement what we're doing in class today and kind of do a slower paced demonstration of this frame by frame animation within Photoshop. So first things first, I am using the 2024 version of Photoshop. If you're on the 2025 version or the old version, the Photoshop CS6, it might look a little bit different, but otherwise everything should roughly be the same, and I'll be demonstrating in ways that should be similar across both. So once we have Photoshop open, to create our document, we're going to go to File at the top left-hand corner, select New. You can also click the New File button there, but again, I'm just trying to make it more similar between the two versions. And for this project, we are going to go through and use the web minimum defaults. So if you need to type that in, the width will be 1000 by 24 pixels, the height will be 768, and the resolution will be set to 72 pixels per inch. You can feel free to ignore all the other settings. And again, your screen won't look like mine, so let me reset that to be more what yours will look like. And then, once I have all this set up, this is what your screen should look like in the end. So to create animations within Photoshop, the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to enable the timeline, which will be able to see all of the frames that we create and play them back. So to do so, we're going to click Window at the top of the screen. We're going to hover over where it says Timeline. We'll click that, and then you'll see the timeline appears at the bottom of the screen here. Two very important things that we need to do. First off, we're not going to create a video timeline. So we're going to click the little down arrow right here. We're going to create a frame animation. And then we'll click Create Frame Animation, and now our timeline will be set properly. Now, if I click this little menu stack over here on the left-hand corner, you'll see that by default, this option, New Layer Visible in All Frames, will be checked. Go ahead and click that to uncheck it. This will just make your life a hassle. It is not something we'll ever use during class. The other thing I'm going to do is down here on the timeline, where this first frame is right here, where it says 0 seconds, I'm going to select that and change it to 0.1 seconds. This is going to set the frame rate to 10 frames per second as opposed to 0.00, which is at a default of 60 frames per second, way more than we'd ever need during class. But other than that, at this point, the document should be all ready to actually start animating on. So when I'm ready to start animating, what I'm going to do is for every frame of animation, we're going to have a specific layer group within Photoshop. So to do so, I'm going to click the plus button down here at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you're on the old version of Photoshop, again, it's going to look like a little square with the corner turned up, but it'll be in the same place to the left of the trash can button. And then once I have that layer created, I'm going to create a layer group by either pressing Ctrl-G with this selected or pressing the little Create a New Group button down there. If you press the button down there, you're going to need to drag that layer into the group. But if you just have that layer selected and again you press Ctrl-G, it'll automatically group that layer for you. One more thing of busy work doing here, just to keep things more organized, you can either leave this as titled to be Group 1. Sometimes I like to click it and name it Frame 1. But for now, I'll just leave it at the default Group 1. It keeps it pretty organized. So I'm going to click the little drop-down arrow to open up that group if it isn't already open. I'm going to select layer 3, And on this layer is where I'm going to go through and draw the ball that we're going to be animating. So to draw, I'll press B to grab my brush tool. Again, I'm going to use the kind of default hard round brush over here. And you have two options when you're making the ball. You can either go and set the size of your brush to be really large, so you can just click and you'll get a perfect ball shape. Or like I said, if I want to decrease the size of my brush, you can also just freehand draw that shape as well. And that's our first frame. It's super, super easy. Now, when we want to create a new frame, what we'll do is we'll click the plus frame button down here at the bottom of the timeline. Again, it's the exact same button as the new layer button. And you'll see that when I click this, it's going to create a new frame on the timeline here. Now, like I said, every frame is going to have its own group associated with it. So what I'm going to do over here where it says group 1, I'm going to right click that. I'm going to duplicate the group. And I'm going to title this group 2, or like I said, you can name it frame 2 if you want. And again, you have two options from here. If I open up that group 2, I can either use my move tool to just click and move that frame wherever I want it. But you'll see here that first frame is still visible here. And what I need to do is just hide that group, which will hide that frame or that circle, that drawing from this frame 2. And this is basically the process that we just repeat over and over and over again. So again, at the bottom left-hand corner, I'll click the new frame button on the timeline to create the new frame. I'll go over here and I'll right-click that group 2, duplicate the group, I'll hit OK. And once I do this, like I said, I can either move that layer down within the group to where I want the ball to be, or I can just go through and erase everything on that layer and redraw the ball if I want to be more kind of traditionally styled frame by frame animation. Again, I want to make sure that once I draw that group 3, I'll hide the group 2. And at any point, you can click the little play button down at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen to see how the animation is looking. Now, like I said, that 0.1 second is going to determine the frame rate. So if I select all the frames by clicking the first one, holding Shift and clicking the last one, I can say set this to 0.2. And now you'll see here that the timeline is moving a lot slower. Essentially here, the 0.2 represents how many tenths of a second that frame is going to be displayed on the screen for. So it requires a little bit of math, but if your frame rate is set to 0.2, that's about 0.5 a second, which means every, or 0.2 a second. So every frame is going to last about 1/5 a second or 5 frames per second. I'm not smart, I don't do math. I'm not expecting you guys to, so I'm just going to set that to 0.1. I'm going to keep it like that, because that's what we'll be animating our final versions at too as well. But again, from here, you just kind of repeat the process over and over and over again. So I'm going to create another new frame right here. If I really want to as well, I can just go and, like I said, duplicate that group. I'm going to be calling this one group 4. Let me actually go and rename my old one to be group 3 to keep things a little bit more organized. And again, on group 4 right here, I'm going to go and redraw it fresh. So I'm just going to erase everything, grab my brush tool, draw that ball a little bit lower. And again, I'll hide group 3 on my layers panel here. I'll repeat it again and again. Create a new layer or frame on the timeline. Duplicate the group. I'll name this group 5. And then, like I said, I can even create a new layer within this group and delete the old one. and then redraw where I want this ball to go next. Like I said, hide that group 4. Again, always as you're working, just go through and play your animation back to see if there's any errors that you might have missed. Now, if you want to go a little special, what I recommend is when the ball starts to get down to the bottom of the screen, is to think about how that ball might react in real life. So for me, what I'm going to do is when I get down here to group number 6, again, I'm just going to create a new layer, delete that old one. I'm going to draw the ball as it hits the ground. I'm going to make it squish. Like it's really harnessing all that potential energy. Again, I'm going to make sure to hide the previous frame. And now when I create a new layer and I duplicate that group, again, I'll name this one group 6, or 7 rather. What I'm going to do now is, on this layer, I'm going to draw the ball kind of shooting up forward. Again, I'll just take my eraser tool. I'll use that to erase the last frame there. If I want to, I can draw some little speed lines. And now you can see we have the simple animation of the ball going and bouncing down. It's only about 7 frames long, but I've only been working on it for a few minutes here. So like I said earlier, the goal is to try and stretch this animation out to be about 20 seconds long in length. So if I pull up my little example here, once the ball bounces, you can either just have it bounce along the edge of the page or, rocket ship throughout the rest of the animation. You can make it fly, spin around, kind of do whatever you want. But as long as I can see the ball moving across the screen in that kind of smooth motion we practice while doing the stop motion, you'll be all set. So please let me know if you have any questions. But other than that, that's what we're working on. I don't know how to